Hello, classic wrestling fans. This is your host, Rick Del Santo. Sadly, this week we lost a very important part of the professional wrestling scene. Referee David Dwinell has passed away after a long illness. I got to know Dave a little bit after an interview that I did with him in 2021, and then I met him in 2023 in person at the New England Fan Fest. He was always a nice guy and had a lot of really great things to say about everybody. I had an interview with Stanley Carr planned for this past week, but I'm going to re-air an interview I did with Dave back in 2021 upon his book that he released, Ringman. Ringman, of course, covered his 32-year career, talks about everybody from Dominic DeNucci to Bruno Sammartino to working the independents to working WWF, NWA, and so much more. It's a great read if anybody comes across it or is interested in it. I highly recommend the book. So without further ado, I want to take you to that interview I did with David Dwinell. Rest in peace, my friend. Please welcome to the show, legendary ref in the Northeast, now current author of Ringman, Dave Dwinell. Dave, how are you, sir?
Well, Rick, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on your show this evening. I'm doing very well, and it's just a pleasure to be here, and I really enjoy talking wrestling, especially wrestling from that classic era.
Yeah, I grew up in the 80s, and I knew you started refereeing in the 1980s, earlier 1980s, and it's really, you started about 2 years before I actually started watching, so you were part of that whole thing when it exploded, and it's just such a wonderful period. And I could, I have to say anywhere from 1985 to 1989 is really my favorite era, and I go back and watch anywhere from 1987 to 1989 all the time. There is a couple of things I have a lot of questions for you today, or a bunch of questions, I should say. I shouldn't say a lot, but we're going to get to it. You grew up in, where was Millbury? Was that in New York?
No, Millbury was in Massachusetts, right outside of Worcester, Mass. Okay. Small mill town. Started watching wrestling as a mere youth back in the 50s when we had 3 channels on the TV, and became infatuated with it as a 10 or 11-year-old lad. Who was your favorite when you were growing up? I know you mentioned Bruno quite a bit, but who else was kind of Bruno yeah. was, and I also liked some of the heels. For example, people like Dr. Bill Miller, who was one of the larger wrestlers at the time, Baron Miguel Cicluna, who was, again, in those days, they weren't certainly as large as today or as big, but I liked some of the bigger fellows. Of course, there was Bruno, and you had people like Miguel Perez was wrestling at the time, Bobo Brazil, all those classic, the Graham brothers, Dr. Jerry and Eddie Graham. Just terrific wrestlers. Buddy Rogers was around at that time, probably a little bit before I started watching, although he would have been there at that time because that was prior to Bruno in the 50s when I started watching. Ray Morgan was the announcer, the color commentator. Friendly Bob Freed was your ring announcer. I'm sure this brings back memories for those of us who are senior citizens.
I want to know that you had your first match. Now, according to what I did, December 27th, 1982, at the Westchester County Civic Center, or Westchester. Let me try this one more time. Westchester County Center in New York, and Johnny Rodz, who obviously was kind of at the tail end of his WWE career. He only had a few more years there from what I remember, but someone that ended up getting rather larger in the industry with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert while he was very young in his career. That was your first match?
Yes, Eddie was probably about 21, 22 years old. And Johnny used to wrestle the people coming into the WWF at that time, it was called. And they would give him matches with the new guys and see if they could take it, to see should they be a face, should they be a heel. Johnny was very well respected by Vince Sr., and Johnny could really wrestle. I mean, he was a tough hombre. And but the nicest guy in the world. I mean, I was nervous when I heard I had to go up and talk to Johnny Rods. My first match, I'm going, oh my God, I saw him at my first show at the Worcester Memorial Auditorium, and he kept looking down and shaking his fist at me. And I said, oh boy. So, and then I got into the locker room and I found out he was anything but a heel. He was just the nicest guy. And he saw the expression on my face and he called me over and he said, let's talk about our match. Because going up the stairs at the county center, I had no idea if this was prescribed, fake, real. Because in those days, kayfabe was in order. And I'm saying to myself, Skolins, who was running the show at the White Plains County, he lived in White Plains.
Okay.
He said, Dave, it's getting late. You better go talk to Rod. So I'm going up the stairs. I'm going, what do I talk to him about? The weather? How's the family? Is wrestling real? You know, and just a great guy. And of course, working with people like young Eddie Gilbert and my second or third show had a very young Kurt Hennig. Working with people like that at the beginning of their careers is something always be very special.
So I do want to know, because you just mentioned that Bruno was basically your favorite, and you ended up working one of his, kind of like he would come out of retirement every now and again and basically help out like house shows or wherever if somebody didn't show up around this time period. You got to work with him, and how was that to work with like your childhood hero, basically?
Well, Bruno had basically retired by that time. But again, he was friendly with Arnold Skolin, who was his manager, as you know. And he was going to be appearing wrestling. He wrestled Cowboy Bob Orton, Randy Orton's father. And it's the only time with the Athletic Commission, because in those days, the WWF could not use their own referees. They had to use commission refs. So for better or worse, they were stuck with us. Well, the only time in my career with the state, and it was about 20 years with the state, that I asked for a specific match. I said, I have to do the Bruno match. I said, it's a once in a lifetime event. So I went out in my street clothes to the audience and saw somebody. There were no cameras like today with the phones.
The cell phones and stuff.
The cell phones and so forth. So I went out to this fellow in the audience and I said, if Bruno wins, will you take my picture? And he said, absolutely. So Bruno wins the match by countout, and we're facing in the wrong direction. I trotted him all the way around the ring to the other side, and he looked down at me and said, is this being televised? I said, no, I'll explain it to you when we get back to the locker room. Just come with me. We posed for the picture. Of course, I put it in the book. And when I told him in the locker room, he got the biggest kick out of it and probably thought this guy's as big a fan as he is a referee. And for that match, I probably was. It was a thrill of a lifetime, really.
So, shortly after that, you became pretty much a regular or full-time ref for the NCW, Northeast Championship Wrestling. And was that about 1984 he started that?
Yes, and that was the original Northeast, not to be confused. There is a Northeast Championship Wrestling that started maybe a year or two after Tommy Jeanette, who was the original owner of the NCW, the original promoter. And I first went on a road with that promotion. I was fortunate enough to be picked as their referee. And I did quite a bit of traveling with them all over the Northeast. Matter of fact, the first show was in Connecticut, Deep River. Our first show was at a high school in Deep River, Connecticut. That was my very first show. And the first guy I met at the show was a wonderful wrestler and wonderful person, the late Ted Petty. Cheetah Kid,
wrestler. Yep.
Yeah, he used to bring the rings. He had a couple of rings at that time that he would rent out, and he would always be in the first match. And so I worked for Tommy up and down the East Coast. He would do fairs in the summertime. We probably did about 10 or 15 fairs, county fairs. We did the North Haven Fair a number of times.
I went to a couple shows at the North. Every year they used to be there. I think it was probably around September. You're
right. It was late. Yeah. It was late. It was in September, and it was always a lot of fun, and it was always good because it wasn't 102 degrees outside.
Yeah. But I want to tell you, I want to ask you this before I move on. Have you ever worked? I know at Northeast Championship Wrestling, I believe that it was Jimmy Snook and the Metal Maniac wrestled there before. Have you worked with those guys before? I know they worked a million matches all over the place.
I worked with Jimmy a number of times. Jimmy would very often wrestle Johnny. Sometimes he would wrestle the Maniac. I think the Maniac drove him, did he not? I think the Maniac was his driver. He was a funny guy. The Metal Maniac was a funny guy. I mean,
well, I did an interview with him about a year ago, and literally it went about 4 hours long. Yeah, well, he had a lot to say.
One of the things I remember about the Metal Maniac is we were working a fair show. I think it was someplace in New York, Fonda, New York, maybe. And I was standing in a corner, and he threw the wrestler. He was wrestling into me. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Well, you have to get out of the corner I'm working in." Well, I had no idea what corner he was going to throw the guy into. But I always enjoyed working with him. His name was Jeff. His real name was Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff Miller. He's a very nice guy. Yeah.
Really nice guy. And, of course, I did enjoy working with Jimmy, who obviously became a controversial character.
Yeah.
At the end of his career. But the Jimmy I knew was very mild and mellow. He was in his last days of wrestling. But the one thing I remember that was amazing about Jimmy was, I don't know how old he was at that point in time, but he could still dive halfway across the ring off the top rope, which was a phenomenal feat for someone who would be his age. It was kind of a sad demise and ending for him. But, such is life. Wrestling is very often it's a how would you say, a reality of life sometimes. Matches life.
Yeah. Some people, I guess, don't retire, and he was like one of those lifer guys.
He did it forever. Yes, he did.
Yeah. And
there's a few others that did that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I met him at a North Haven Fair show, NCW, and he was a very, very nice guy. He stuck around after the matches were done and talked to all the kids and signed autographs and just hung around. He was a very nice guy. So
interesting thing with Jimmy that many people don't know, I might share with you, it might be interesting, is
sure.
They were thinking of making Jimmy the champion at one time, because he never had the belt, as you probably know. They were thinking of making him champion at one time. He said, why would you do that? We have two promotions. Bob is a champion. I'm drawing just as well as Bob. I don't need the belt. So he told Vince, I don't need the belt. I'll draw for you. So I thought that was pretty cool, because most people would, want the belt. And he said it didn't make that much difference to him, that he was drawing okay. And he put the promotion ahead of himself. But it's kind of an interesting.
He was immensely popular at one time, especially when I was a kid, probably 1984, 85, when it first. He was just all over the place. He was just I would go into a restaurant, there'd be people wearing snooker shirts, kids wearing. People loved him when I was.
I think him and Jake Roberts were the two that always appeared in the top 10 back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was always Snooker and Jake who had appeared in the top 10. Jake was also very popular at that time as well.
Have you seen Jake's speaking tour?
I haven't seen his speaking tour, but I did pop up, believe it or not, recently. I was watching Jake's biography, and I was in one of the matches where he was kind of bloodied in the ring, and I think I could only see the back, but it looked like the back of Rikishi, which is which I don't even remember that match, but it just popped up, and that was kind of cool. But I always liked working with Jake, and as a matter of fact, in the book, when it came time, I wanted a couple quotes on the back of the book. The first guy I went to was Johnny Rod. He gave me a great quote. I contacted some of the other guys I worked with who are probably still connected with the WWE now, and I didn't hear back from them. I asked Jake, and Jake got back to me immediately, and he said, I always liked working with you, Dave. He goes, I'll be glad to give you a quote. And he gave me a real nice quote for the back of the book. I think he said something like, to have a great match, it takes three things: face, a heel, and a good referee, and Dave was one of the good ones. So for that, I'm very grateful to Jake for.
That's really great.
He didn't forget me.
That's awesome.
Hey everyone, you want to listen to the best in pro wrestling talk? Tune in to the Top Rope Report podcast with Mr. Trivia and the Nugster Greg every Sunday, 6:30 p.m. on TalkShoe.com, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast. Join us as we discuss WWE, NXT, PAPW Independent Wrestling, and a whole lot more. It's the Top Rope Report, the best in pro wrestling talk.
Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
Now, I know in the book you've mentioned that you work with Herb Abrams in the UWF, and I'm trying to remember the particular match that you mentioned. And was it David Sammartino and Ivan Koloff?
I made a mistake when I talked to you on that, and I probably made a mistake in the book. It's the only one. There were two mistakes in the book. That, and the other mistake is, I'm not going to tell you, but if somebody can figure it out, it's in a match. I talked about a match I worked, and I said it was one guy, and it really was another guy. But if you can guess the match, I'll send you a free copy of the book. But I thought, I'm sorry, excuse me. I thought this was a Herb Abrams show.
Okay.
Because Herb at the time had come into New York, and he had Bruno doing some announcing. But later I found out, I think it was through John Pantozzi. I don't know if you know John, a very nice guy. He does the wrestling memorabilia site. And he was on one of the shows. He had one of the items they were looking for. Well, at any rate, I thought it was a Herb Abrams show. I've been looking forever for this video. It was David Sammartino versus Ivan Koloff, and then you had with Lou Albano in the corner and announcing, doing the color commentary was Bruno. I did Kamala. I did anybody who was anybody was at that show. Dick Kroll and myself worked the show. I later found out through John Pantozzi that it was not a Herb Abrams show because Herb never used David. It ended up being a Tommy D show. Tommy D used to run shows in New York, especially in the Staten Island area. It was a Tommy D show, and supposedly the thing has never surfaced. So, but I thought it was Herb Abrams because of the talent. I never worked for Herb on television because he never taped in New York. He always taped in Vegas and L.A.
He taped at the Penta Hotel in New York. He did a couple TV tapings out there.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, that was one of the staple television places that he did outside. You know, he did California a lot. It was the majority of them, but there was a couple tapings in New York, which I believe that's the hotel that was across from the Garden, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. The reason I said that is because I talked to the fellow who's doing the book on Herb. There's a John.
He was on our podcast. Really,
he mentioned something to me about he didn't think Herb ever taped in New York, but evidently it was not a Herb Abrams show because Herb Abrams did not. I've had a couple people tell me that. So. Yeah. But of course, it was 40 years ago or whatever, 35 years ago.
It's about 30, yeah.
30 years ago?
Yeah, because
I remember working for Herb Abrams, but I don't remember too much about working with him. I didn't work a whole lot with him, but I did work in the New York area with him when he ran shows. I don't ever remember working at the Penta Hotel for him.
Yeah, that's. I know there was a couple other places that he did run in New York.
Brooklyn, maybe Brooklyn.
Yeah, I know there was a show and from what I heard, it might have been from John. That's right in the book that I heard this when he was on that. They showed up to a building that was just a horrific, dilapidated building that was like falling apart that they booked. So it could have been.
There were a few of those around back then. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So, so you never really had many altercations, or not altercations, but interactions with Herb then?
Not too much. I don't remember. I remember working for him. I remember the name. I remember I never had any
Yep.
problems with him. I rarely had problems with any of the promoters.
Yep.
I tried to show up, look professional, do a good job, and kind of low key it. And I do remember her, but again, I don't remember anything specifically outlandish or outstanding, about the shows. Again, the independents in those days, although I don't know if you'd consider him an independent because he did quite a bit of TV, but the independents in those days are much different than today. It kind of seems like today there's an independent in every other town. Back then, the independents had top caliber quality on top of the show, top to bottom mostly, using a few fill-ins. And it was a little bit of a different story. And like I say, Herb was one that ran. USWF, United States Wrestling Federation, with Bob Bailey ran. Tommy Jeanette ran. And later, of course, Michael Lombardi with NEW, whom I worked for 14, 13 years. At the beginning, I was his one ref. I would do all 6-7 matches when he started out.
He started off, and look at what he's become these days. He's running multiple shows, like probably, I don't know what, a couple a week, you know what I mean, now, as opposed to once a month or once every other month back in, was it 1995? It was
around 95, I think, 94, 95.
I think that's about when he started. He's grown so much, and he's gotten a lot of his shows are just really, he puts on really, really good shows, and they're full of a lot of guys. I've gone to like the Wrestling Under the Stars shows.
Sure.
I've been to the arena, the NEW arena, because it's not far from me. So,
well, I saw him. I was there when he started out. I was, as a matter of fact, he used me. Well, let's say if he started in '94, and I went to 2015, that would be how many years? About 14 years, right?
Yeah,
something like that. And again, when he first started out, I was doing all his matches. I do six or seven matches, and then he added on. And I have to say one thing about Michael. He was very, very, very faithful to me. I at the end, when I had injured my knee badly, I tried to come back and I couldn't. I think, as I said in the book, he would have used me if I came in a ring with a cane or a walker. He probably still would have had me referee a match. I mean, that's how really such a wonderful friend he was all those years to me. And because we worked together all the way up from the humble beginnings to where he became, and now above and beyond, even when I was, finishing up with him.
Right. So my other question is, they were only briefly mentioned in the book, and there was no detail, so I wasn't sure. Now, these guys were a staple in the New England area and the Northeast for God knows how long. The Savoldis, did you ever work with them?
I did. Of course, when I'd work in New York or New Jersey, they had to use state officials. So I worked with Tommy Fernini many times. And Billy Silverman was on those shows too.
Yes.
And when in New York, I would get assigned. I had some nice videos, and I've lost them over the years, VHS videos of some of the shows I worked that they taped. The one was at Ossining High School, and it was a really good show. And I've kind of lost it over the years, but I did work with them, and they always ran a very professional show. There was always a lot of talent, good matches, drew good crowds in the New York area, and certainly one of the, I didn't work quite as much with them because I was getting a lot of work with, like I was the sole referee for the USWF. I was the sole referee for North NCW. I was doing my New York shows. So I kind of was, and then later with NEW, I was very fortunate to have, hooked up with three fine promotions. So I didn't work quite as much with them. And they had their own staple of referees. They had Tommy and they had Billy Silverman, both very good referees. So,
That was the first organization I ever discovered outside of like WWF and the NWA. So it quickly became a favorite, as it was just something a little bit different about it. You know what I mean? It was a lot of fun to watch on TV as a kid.
Sure. He was on. That was the IWF, was it? Was that the IWF?
That was ICW, and then IWCCW. IWF was Eddie Mansfield's promotion that
Oh, okay.
eventually took over the same television spot on Sports Channel America.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, to show you how naive I was when I first entered the business, I had no idea there was something called independent shows. And in the book, I mentioned my first one was in one of the worst sections of the Bronx, with 74 out of 75 people drinking out of brown paper bags. And that's when I first became aware that there was life outside the WWF. I mean, you talked about your first independent was the Savoldi's. My first independent was taking my life in my hands up in the Bronx, New York.
That's a great story in the book. You got to read the book, people. This is a really good book, and I was like, I sat down the other day because I wanted to finish it off before I got to you, so I didn't want to miss anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That I might want to ask you. And I got to tell you, this was such a fun read, especially growing up in like the Northeast myself and in Connecticut. And you were on a lot of the shows that I watched. Whether you were in the Garden, you wrestled or not wrestled, excuse me, refereed in the Garden. You know what
about
I mean?
15 times, about 15 shows.
So there's a chance that if you go watch an older MSG televised event that you're going to be on the show. There's a chance of it. So I thought that was pretty awesome. And you mentioned, was it you ref Brutus and One Man Gang in the
right?
In my
first Garden show was Brutus and the One Man Gang, and it was a double count out. They both fell out of the ring, and it was quite an experience. Working the Garden was phenomenal. I mean, you had 16,000 people there. And all the ring announcer Howard Finkel had to do was say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," and 16,000 people just totally erupted at the same time. And I mean, give you goosebumps just hearing that. And I think there was a lot more. I don't know, how would you say, a lot more audience participation back in those days.
Yeah, sometimes you watch now, and I know you mentioned it in your book. And I've said this before watching, I don't watch a lot of the modern WWE. You sit there and watch it, and there's a lot of people sitting on their hands, like you said. And it doesn't seem to be the reaction's not there for some reason in the modern era as it was.
Not the same. Well, I think part of it, and I might be wrong, and I'm not knocking today, and I don't knock them in the book because different times, different circumstances, they're bigger, they're faster, like in all sports. I'm not going to say one era was better than the other. One wrestling, the wrestlers from the past were better than the wrestlers today. But the thing that I kind of felt was, especially on the college shows, the high school shows, I did a show in Mount Vernon where there were 12 matches, and the last match was a tag team championship match between the British Bulldogs and Valentine and Beefcake, was it? Who was this?
Valentine and Beefcake, and I think that in that tag team, because I think that Dino Bravo replaced Beefcake.
Okay, but I think at the time it might have been Beefcake, and that was the 12th match of the evening. That was the final match of the evening. But you had everybody close to the ring. You had an interaction going back and forth with the fans. That I thought, and today there seems to be a lot of. I mean, I guess they did they do 2 tapings at once at the shows? Or
it depended because I probably at those shows. I know my first live show was in 1988, New Haven Coliseum. I don't know if you've ever been there before.
And I haven't worked there at least once or twice.
Really, my first live show, I finally actually went to a live show in '88, and they literally recorded for about, I think they did 3 shows, but I think like there was like a period where there was definitely 2 shows recorded because there wasn't as many matches on some of them.
Which is a long time for people to sit. I would.
Yeah.
But they're doing something right because they're filling arenas and they're making a lot of money, and God bless them. I'm glad they are, and things do evolve. But I certainly have a strong place in my heart for the good old days. When kayfabe was in play.
Myself too. I mean, as much as I still love it, I still go to shows all the time. It's the earlier days from when I grew up are probably my favorite, but I still watch, all the time and attend shows. So I'm still having fun
I had no idea that there was this much interest in the golden or classic era. I only joined Facebook because my grandkids kept saying, my kids kept saying, you want to see the grandkids' pictures, you got to join Facebook. We're not emailing them to you anymore. So I said, all right, I'll join Facebook. And then when the book came out, I started looking at all these different websites on Facebook, and I've probably done, this is probably my 7th podcast or broadcast.
Oh, wow.
I've done one in Europe even. Some guy from England contacted me. And the funny part is many of the people that I did the broadcast with, they go, when we got your book, and when you contacted us, like with you, I sent people a copy of the book. And I say, hey, if you think it's worthwhile, maybe you put me on the podcast. Well, a couple of them said, we had no idea who the hell you were. But we read the book and we really liked it, because so people don't know the name. But I mean, even when I worked at County Center almost every other month, I'd go to a gas station in Yonkers and I go, where do I know you from? They had no idea my name, but they knew the face because they had seen me in the ring at the County Center. So it's been a lot of fun, and I had no idea how much interest there really was in all the various websites that are out there, and people like yourself that are trying to, talk to us oldies but goodies and get alive.
I'm going to tell you that how we hooked up was from the Guardian of Chaos, Big Daddy. When he said that you wrote a book, he wants, I should have him on the podcast, and he told me your name. And once I looked you up, I knew exactly who you were, and I was like, I know exactly who he is. I said I seen him at many shows in Connecticut. So yeah.
I always tell people no one ever bought a ticket to see a ref. My job was to make the guys look good, and I felt if I did that, I would I'd hang around.
Are you a fan of horror movies?
Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead.
What about cult classics?
Your move, creep.
If you are, you'll love Shocking Things. Please search for us on all the major podcasting platforms. To see our social media and a direct link to our podcast, please go to anchor.fm/shockingthings.
Hey everyone, you want to listen to the best in pro wrestling talk? Tune in to the Top Rope Report podcast with Mr. Trivia and the Nugster Greg every Sunday, 6:30 p.m. on TalkShoe.com, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast. Join us as we discuss WWE, NXT, PAPW Independent Wrestling, and a whole lot more. It's the Top Rope Report, the best in pro wrestling talk.
Tell me about the USWF. Now, did you work I know they did shows at Southern Connecticut State University, which I had attended, because I lived literally at that time period, lived around the corner, excuse me. I don't remember much about these shows, but I just remember them happening. And so, can you tell me a little bit more about this promotion?
Well, Bob always used some top talent. He used people like Bigelow, the independents in those days, and Bob was no exception. They used people like Slaughter, Snooker, Bigelow. They'd use other people on top that were hot on the independent. The Iron Sheik was very popular. Bob used the Iron Sheik an awful lot, and of course, you'd put a couple masks on guys and call them the executioners and stuff like that. But Bob he used Edge, people like Edge, and he had a lot of pretty good talent on his shows, and he always ran a very family friendly orientated show. There wasn't blood, there wasn't cursing. He was him and his wife, really nice people. They co-promoted the shows, and we kind of hooked up on a show in New York, and he liked the way I worked with the guys, and he liked me as a person. So he said, Dave, I'd like to request you on my shows in New York, and I'd like to use you. He did a lot of university shows. He had a friend he worked with, so we did a lot of SUNY shows in New York, SUNY Cobleskill, SUNY Albany, SUNY, a whole lot of different SUNY shows. And he just, I'm just going to, the old sinuses are dripping all, but he was a good guy to work with. He as I say, he used people, a good friend of mine, Larry Winters. I don't know if you remember Larry Winters.
The first time I ever saw Larry Winters, he got if you don't mind the language, he got the shit kicked out of him by Larry Zbyszko in the AWA.
Oh yeah, they used them. They kind of used them as a battering ram. He used to wrestle DC Drake,
yes,
before ECW, and they would have very tough. How would you call them? ECW type matches. Extreme matches. They were almost a precursor to ECW.
I could think of two promotions that was it either the NWF or Tri-State Wrestling at that time period?
Yes, yeah, I remember there was an NWF and there was a Tri-State Wrestling, right, that worked in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and I think.
Yeah, and the NWF was anybody who's worked there. The Strongbows worked there, and DC Drake was there quite a bit. Slaughter. And
DC might have been the booker or the backroom manager for one of those promotions, possibly. I think he might have been.
Gary Michael Capetta was there for quite some time.
Yes. Yeah, I remember. Why that brings back some memories.
A lot of that stuff is on YouTube, the NWS stuff. If you ever want to check it out, I used to have some of the commercial. They did a bunch of commercial videotapes back in the day, and it's definitely a precursor to, like, say, the ECW and stuff like that extreme stuff. It's a lot of fun to watch. Yeah.
You were talking about Big Daddy. I have to mention Big Daddy. I worked with him many, many times, and I'm very upset at him. He put what was considered by many the worst dance with Umaga before he was Umaga, when he was one of the Samoan SWAT teams or whatever, and Rikishi. I did a NEW show where Umaga and Rikishi had teamed up, and at the time they would do the island dance or a break dance after that, and they insisted I do it with them, and I didn't want to because I can't dance. I cannot dance. And he put this up on his Facebook. I don't know if you've seen it or not. He put it up.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And I put under it, I'm not ready for Dancing with the Stars yet. Why did you do this? So I'm a little upset at him, but he was great to work with. Big Daddy was awesome to work with. He's a great guy.
He is a great guy. He's very cool. And honestly, he helped me out a lot with this podcast. So he's been on here probably 4 or 5 times, and he's
never at all words.
Yeah.
Never at all words.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So this I really want to talk to you about because this is probably voted not in a good way.
I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
Probably one of the worst wrestling shows of all time. Pay-per-views on TV, the Heroes of Wrestling. Now, prior to this, the main event was supposed to be 2 different matches. It turned into Jake and the Anvil. So, am I getting that right? Jake and the Anvil and Bundy
and Yokozuna. Jake and Yokozuna against
prior
Bundy
to that.
And Nighthawk.
Yep. Prior to that, probably, I don't know, a month or so, I ended up seeing a match that was sort of similar to that for a Northeast Wrestling show has to be almost in Danbury or somewhere out there like that in Connecticut. So, with Big Daddy was involved actually in that match, but not but he didn't make it. He wasn't on the Heroes of Wrestling. So, but that was kind of coincidental. But how did you hook up working with the Heroes of Wrestling and that pay-per-view? I know there was supposed to be a series of them.
Well, Michael Lombardi did the booking, and some of the guys he wanted to use were not available. It was Gordon Soley was supposed to be there.
I know.
Play-by-play, and I was so disappointed because I was so looking forward to seeing Gordon, meeting him. And unfortunately, they brought in a fellow who really wasn't all that familiar with wrestling. And also it just kind of really didn't gel. If they had had a high enough rating, they would have gone with a weekly series. I think the idea, I think the idea itself was good, or a monthly. There might have been not a weekly. I think they were going to do a monthly. And I was really super excited. So obviously after the show, I was fairly disappointed that it didn't go according to the way I would have liked it to. But it's the only time in my 32-year career that I went into the ring without a finish, because none of the four guys wanted to take the pin. And Neidhart was, I think, originally supposed to, but what happened was he was going back with Vince, so the WWF had said something about don't go getting pinned in a ring. Certainly Yoko and Bundy was not going to get pinned. Bundy's famous line was, I love Bundy. Him and I we got along so well. His famous line was, I can't lose tonight. My relatives are in the audience. So we were doing a show in Trinidad. And I said, Bundy, you got relatives in the audience? And he, shut up. And so we went in the ring, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And I said, this is not good. And on live television. So I said to Bundy, after a number of minutes in a match, I said to Bundy, I said, geez, maybe you ought to throw me out of the ring and I'll pretend I'm hurt and I'll have to have another referee come out and deal with this and I'll go back to the locker room. I said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. And so what happened was he knocked over Jake and then pinned him, and I counted to 3. And of course, most of the websites go, what the heck was that referee doing? They weren't the legal men in the ring. Well, I would have told Bundy to pin me just to get the match over with. I would have said, Bundy, pin me. I didn't care if they were the legal men, because we might still be working now if we hadn't figured out something in the ring itself. So Bundy said, we'll take care of it. And we did. And fortunately it finished. And of course, many of the guys on that show were past their prime and not able to work. And it just never really worked. But I am infamous or famous for that show, I guess.
There's a lot of potential for on that show. The opening match was, what was it? Tommy Rogers and Marty Jannetty and the Samoans and stuff. So I mean,
there were some good matches on there. I wouldn't say that the Abbey, the Bruni, and One Man Gang was one of the better matches, nor the George Steele and wasn't that a tag? No, that wasn't a tag.
Who did he fight?
The Sheep Herders were in one of those.
Yeah, but George Steele, I think, was against Bob Orton, right? If I remember correctly. Well, Bob was definitely past his prime at that time.
And then you had the Iron Sheik and Volkov against the Sheep Herders.
Yeah.
See,
and you called them the Sheep Herders. I like that. So
that's how they were that night, because they couldn't use the name. What were they with Vince? The
Bushwhackers.
They couldn't use the name the Bushwhackers.
Yeah. I remember them first as the Sheep Herders growing up in the NWA, and then they were the Bushwhackers, completely different.
Yeah, I did a match in the Bunkhouse Brawl in the Nassau Coliseum with the Sheep Herders against a very, very young, blonde-haired, crew-cut fellow with a little paint on his face called Sting. And I forget who his partner was. Jimmy Garvin was his partner.
Okay.
And it was a dark match, but I did see it eventually. Somebody had it on the internet.
What was it like working for the NWA or WCW, whatever it was at that time period? How many times have you worked with them?
Well, I worked one of the first shows when I came into the New York area as the NWA, and I was super excited because I felt at that point in time they were more wrestling and less showbiz. So I was really excited, and I remember working Superstar Graham in a match. I think he fought, who was it? The brother of Jake Roberts, the half-brother of Jake Roberts.
Oh, Sam Houston.
It was Superstar Graham against Sam Houston, and I'll never forget, one of the best compliments I ever got. I went down for the pin, and I counted it. I always Johnny Rods taught me, put your head next to the shoulders to give realism to it. Some of these guys, some of these refs would be on the other side of the ring, jumping up and down off their knees, counting. Well, I always went to make it look real. And when I went down, Sam Houston was going, "Oh my God, an East Coast ref that knows how to work." And I thought that was a great compliment from him. I also did J.J. Dillon, who got beat by the Italian Stallion.
Wow.
And
That's crazy.
And what was his name? He looked like the Tom Selleck lookalike. He was
Scott Hall back then?
No, he was injured in a plane crash. I think
Oh,
he was injured in that.
Magnum TA.
Magnum TA.
Yeah.
I did Magnum TA that evening.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't remember who we wrestled.
So that's
but,
pretty early on. That's pretty early on for them trying.
I was
to come up
thrilled.
here.
I was thrilled working with them. And then I did a USA Pro Wrestling show where they combined the best of the talent of the NWA, the AWA, and the Georgia Championship Wrestling, and they came into New York because Vince was going into their territories. And I did other than Bruno, the greatest match I felt I ever did in 32 years was Nick Bockwinkel against Rick Martel for the AWA title with Buddy Rogers in Bockwinkel's corner. So I got to work with Buddy Rogers.
You ref that match?
Yes.
I've seen that match. I've seen it, and I'm going to look it up when we get out of here.
Oh, they did it again someplace.
Oh, okay.
They did it again. It wasn't, if you could find it, I would certainly,
Oh,
but I think they did it again on a televised. I think Martel wrestled him in a televised match, and that wasn't the one I did. This was out at Tottenville High School, I think, in Staten Island.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow.
It was a small show, and but just to work with Buddy Rogers was one of the greatest thrills of my life. To be yelling at him, he was arguing with me at the end of the match because I didn't see something, or maybe Bockwinkel had his foot on a rope and I didn't see it, and he was yelling at me, and I was arguing with him, and I'm saying to myself, this man is history. The first guy that was both the NWA and the WWF champion. So I did have a chance to work with the NWA. And then when the NWA became regional promotions, I worked with a group from North Carolina. I actually went to Germany with them. They invited me to go to Germany. Too Cold Scorpio, not the Rockers, but what was it? Maybe the Rockers.
The Rock and Roll Express?
Rock and Roll Express. I worked with the Rock and Roll Express. I worked with Too Cold Scorpio. There were a bunch of other guys on that show. And we went over to Germany. So I had some fun working with the NWA, and I always enjoyed working with them.
I just want to ask you about a couple of people that you worked with that, excuse me, regularly on the independent circuit in the Northeast area, New England area.
Mm-hmm.
So, Misty Blue Sims, how do you?
Oh my God! If I had a nickel for every match I did of hers, worked all the fair shows with her for Tommy Jeanette. Tommy used her on every show. She would either bring Linda Dallas or Mad Dog Debbie or Comrade Olga. She would bring different girls to the show, and I worked with them, I think, more than any other female that I ever worked with. And we always had spots on the show. What I really liked about Misty was she always had spots for me. I didn't put it in a book because it's a little risque for kids. Maybe, I don't know. Not today, not according to today, but we did the honeymoon spot. Misty would be covered by, let's say, Linda Dallas, and Linda would get thrown off, and I would roll on my back, and Linda would land on me. So she's landing on me, on my chest, and I'm laying on a mat, and then she jumps off, and she's all upset, in a very suggestive position, obviously, and I would put my head up and start smiling to the audience. Well, this would get just the most phenomenal laugh from the audience. And that was one of the spots we worked. Another spot that we worked is when I checked the bad girl out, Linda or one of the other girls. I almost lost my jaw one night because they used to put their boots up and take them down really quick, and she kicked me in the jaw with the boot. Well, Misty would come in, and I'd check her, and then she'd turn around and show me her derriere and go, "Check this out, ref." And then she would be outside the ring, And she'd have the girl's legs, one on the bottom rope and one on top of the bottom rope and one under it, and she'd be pulling her, and I'd be pulling the arm. She'd be pulling the legs outside the ring. I'd be pulling the arm in the ring. She'd get the people in the audience to help her. And then she'd let go. And then she would let go. So I would tumble backwards and take a huge bump in the ring as if the chain had been broken. So we always had 3 or 4 spots that always went over very, very well with the audience. And I always enjoyed working with her and her husband, John Sims, very much. The
other one I want to ask you about now, you mentioned Northeast Championship Wrestling quite a bit. Did you work with Bert Centeno a lot?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Do you know Bert?
I remember him on WWF TV as a kid, getting squashed in ICW TV, and then I started going to Northeast Championship Wrestling shows, and he started showing up there one day a couple times. So,
Well, he came from Worcester, Mass, where I saw my first show at the Worcester Memorial Auditorium, and he used to run some shows up there, I believe. And always enjoyed working with him. Always fun to work with, and he was usually in one of the preliminary matches with NCW or some of the other promotions, and a hard worker, a good worker, and a nice guy. Definitely. Matter of fact, I recently touched base with him again through Facebook. We became friends on Facebook. But if I could mention one thing about Facebook, which I found very funny, was I didn't know the names of most of the wrestlers I worked with. I didn't know their real names. I knew this guy is this guy. I knew this guy is that guy. Well, this guy writes to me and he says, Dave, you worked my first TV match. Dave, I love working. I says, who the heck is this guy? I don't remember him. It was a Kodiak Bear. I only knew him as the Kodiak Bear. I never called wrestlers by their real names. Tanaka was always Professor T. I wouldn't call him by his real name, which was Charles Kalani, or I wouldn't call the Iron Sheik it was always Sheik. I just felt I don't know. I just, even in restaurants, I just kind of kept up to kayfabe.
Right.
And didn't know a lot of names, but recently retouched base with Bert. Great guy.
We mentioned him before, but how about Larry Winters?
Larry was one of the first guys I met. I worked some shows for Mark Tendler. There was a promoter in Long Island called Jack Barnett. And Mark liked the way I worked. He invited me to go to Cherry Point, North Carolina to a show on a Navy base, or Army, I think it was an Army base. Very, very young Larry Winters. I was it was probably early 80s. Larry Winters, a guy by the name of Troy Orndorff. Do you know who he morphed into?
Shane Douglas.
That's correct. He wrestled one of his first matches. Danucci was there, one of my all-time great favorites. Dominic Danucci was there. Slaughter was wrestling. We had the Moondogs. Misty Blue was on the show, very young Misty Blue. And we went down there, and only Mark Tendler could do this. He books a show on a weekend where the troops are out on bivouacs. But we had a ball.
I've heard some interesting stories about this Tendler guy, gentleman.
I'm sure you have.
I know that. Have you ever listened to John Arezzi's podcast or no?
I have seen some of them. Yes, I have.
He mentions him quite a bit, and I didn't know that Tendler's grandson was a wrestler, and he's appeared on this show. He goes by the name Death Mark.
Okay.
Very nice kid. He would talk about his grandparents quite a bit, and Kitty Adams, who was his grandmother. And
is she still alive, Kitty?
She passed recently.
Okay.
Probably in the last, I'd have to say in the last few months. I know
Mark and I and Kitty were very close. We got along. I liked Mark a lot. He liked me, and we got along well. And he always would request me on his shows. Matter of fact, it was one of his shows, and I got to get a tape of this if I ever run into Mick Foley. It was on Mick's biography, the old original Mick's, and on a new one. It's myself, and he's in a tag team, and he wrestled as Jack Foley. It was one of his first matches. I think it was a Mark Tendler show.
Oh, okay.
On a Long Island. Mark would work with Dominic Danucci and his guys. And I believe it was a Mark Tendler show. I could be wrong, but I believe it was out in Long Island near where Mick lived. Now, this must have been a handheld camera, and either by one of his friends or family. And I've seen the footage several times on snippets. Then I would love to have a copy of that match, because that had to be one of his very, very first public matches.
Who did he go against, or you don't remember?
It was a tag team match, and it was a blonde fellow with frizzy hair on the show. And I can't remember the fellow's name, but it was a tag team match, and I've tried to freeze frame it a little bit, and you can definitely see me moving around a little bit and circling around. And I know it was me because I used to wear long sleeve shirts when they had to wear the powder blue with the bow tie. I would wear long sleeve shirts and roll them up on independent shows just below my elbow, so I wouldn't scrape my elbows when I slid. I used to do a lot of sliding, and I didn't want to scrape my elbows. And in the picture, you can see the sleeves rolled up to my just below my elbow. So I'd love to get a copy of that.
So there's a couple more questions that I have for you, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
Another name that you mentioned in this book, he worked for WWF for quite a bit, and then became an independent staple in the 80s and into the early 90s, and worked early ECW, Salvatore Bellomo.
Oh, yes. Salvatore was on the first show I ever worked. My first match, as I mentioned earlier, was Eddie Gilbert against Johnny Rodz. My second match, I had two matches that evening. My second match was Salvatore Bellomo against Mac Rivera. It was supposed to be Mr. X, but they changed it to Mac Rivera. So I did Sal, and Sal went over. But I mentioned, I don't know if you recall in the book, I mentioned that funny story about Sal, the time he got in a ring for TV taping for, I don't know, it was maybe one of the local NWA promoters. And Sal got in a ring with a guy that had never wrestled. And it was his first time in a ring. And Sal gets in, and Sal could be a hothead. And Sal gets in the ring. And I call for the bell, and Sal says, "Hook up." And the guy just stood there and looked at him. And Sal goes, "Let's hook up." The guy just stood there and looked at him. Sal tried to pick up dead weight and slam him. He couldn't hardly get him up. He slammed him, and he covered him. Then he starts cursing and swearing in some foreign language. And I said to the guy, "You better get the hell out of here." I said, "Go to the locker room, get the hell out of here." I said, "You don't want to see him when he gets back to the locker room." And the guy literally took his clothes and jumped in his car and left without getting paid. But he totally freaked out in the ring. And but Sal was always fun to work with. He was a fun. He changed. He morphed into a different guy. I remember working with him one night, and then all of a sudden, a few years later, he's dressed up as Don Quixote or somebody with a sword. And,
yeah, it was like a Viking, like a Roman soldier or something. I remember that from his earliest ECW days. He came dressed up like that as well. And my question is that you mentioned a very young Paul Heyman coming into,
yes.
Did you work early ECW when they were still an NWA affiliate in the independent, as an independent? Or no?
No, I did not. But an interesting story, and it's in the book. But I'll just tell it for the people listening. I was at a WWF show in the early '80s, probably, and I hear a knock at the back door. So I open the door, and there's a high school kid standing there with some mimeograph papers, pictures of wrestlers, and stories. And he said, "Could I come in and pass these out and take a few pictures?" I said, it was a small show at a college or a high school. I said, "Well, I'm not supposed to let you do this, but you seem like a nice guy. I'll let you in." So he comes in, and he's passing out these papers and so forth. So I said, "Would you take a picture of me and my friend, the Sheik?" And he goes, "Sure." So he takes a Polaroid of me and the Sheik that you pull out, and he puts a sticker on the back: "Property of Paul Heyman, may not be used without permission." This is a high school kid putting a sticker telling me, after I let him in the locker room, that I can't use this unless I give him credit for it. So that was my first introduction to Paul. Paul lived very close to where I lived. He lived in Hartsdale, New York. I lived in Ardsley, New York. And my real job was I did wrestling part-time, weekends, summers, all of that. My real job was collecting taxes for one of the largest towns in New York State. And I collected Paul Heyman's father's taxes. I collected Freddie Blassie's taxes. I also collected Arnold Scolin's taxes. And I knew Paul quite well. So I met Paul one night in Marty's Mug and Munch, top hamburger place. I said, Paul, I understand that you're starting a new promotion. I said, would you like to consider me for one of the refs? And he goes, Dave, I don't think this is the kind of promotion that you'd probably fit in too well with. Well, after I saw the product, I said, he's probably right. However, to Paul's credit, anytime I worked an ECW show, a lot of New York refs weren't working. He would just pay him, but he'd use his own. Always got 2 matches for Paul. He always gave me 2 matches. He always, I pulled a little rib on him one night. Do you mind? You got time if I tell you?
Absolutely.
I pulled a little rib on him one night. We were working at the, where was it? The Poughkeepsie Civic Center. And Johnny, of course, had trained Tommy Dreamer and Taz. Okay. And they were now big names on the show that night. Okay. And Paul knew that I had worked with Johnny when he was training these guys, and Johnny used to beat up on him all the time. I said, Paul, I hope you don't mind, but I'm selling some videos upstairs. I see Johnny Ross, Pin Taz, and Tommy Dreamer in the same night. And he said, you're not selling those upstairs. I said, no, I'm not. But I had him worried that I was showing, because Johnny was very old at the time. The 2 of his stars would have been pinned in the same night. I probably had him on tape someplace, but I remember Paul was always very fair with me. And I saw him not long ago at a restaurant in Westchester, and he came running up to me, gave me a beer hug, and made me feel good that he remembered me, and that we had some good time.
That's awesome. I remember watching Tommy and Taz coming up prior to ECW, before the Savoldi's, and Heyman was there for a brief period, probably like a day or so. But so you were inducted into 2 different Hall of Fames, the Northeast Wrestling Hall of Fame and Joe Bruin's New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yes, I was, and then last year I didn't put it in the book. I don't think I was inducted into the USWF Hall of Fame.
Okay.
Bob Bailey started one up. But yeah, I'm very proud of that. I was in the first class of the NEW with Bam Bam Bigelow, who was put in posthumously, and
Kurt Adonis,
yes, a good friend. And it's something I'll always, and Michael also gave me a beautiful plaque on my 25th anniversary in the business. I have that picture in the book, and he was always very gracious to me.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to wrap it up. So is there anything that you'd like to plug right now? First, before you do that, I just want to say that this really is an amazing book, people. I really want people to check it out, especially, you grew up watching in the 80s and 90s. It's something worth checking out.
Well, I thank you for that. And I'd also like to say, too, that the book is dedicated to wrestling fans of all ages and generations. I have the greatest respect for the fans, and I tried to make the book affordable. I put the ebook at $5.99, and I put the paperback at $14.99. I really couldn't go any lower than that, but I wanted to make it affordable, and the whole purpose of the book, it's not really about me. It's about the business and the wonderful times and the people I was able to, and I was very pleased. Recently, Slam had wanted to do a review of it, and I was a little nervous as what they would think, but the fellow who did the review really liked it a lot, and most of the people like yourself that I've sent it to have enjoyed it. And Slam, I think, hit it kind of on the head. It was kind of, they said reading the book was kind of like me sitting in a bar talking about my experiences or the stories, because the real reason I wrote the book is I'm not really anybody famous, but I'll be the first to admit that. But whenever I would get together with relatives, friends, family, they would always say, Dave, tell us a few stories about behind the scenes and guys you worked with. What was it like working with this guy? Was this guy really, that rough and all of that? So I wanted to share with the fans the wonderful experiences I've had. And so I've been pleasantly surprised that the book has been, fairly well received by wrestling fans. And it's made me feel good because I was nervous. Again, who's heard of Dave Dwinell? But now I can share with people, and it's a good feeling. And plus, I'm 72. I'm retired. It gave me something to do in retirement.
Well, there you go.
Oh,
Thank you very much for coming on, and I highly recommend this book, people. It's just a really great book to read. Thank you, Dave.
well, thank you for having me, and all the best.